Hi everyone, what's up? Welcome back to my tutorial channel. It's Daniela Tran here, and today we are going to work on some more IFM practice problems. In this video is section 4-2, the core level. Problem 1. You are given the following information about a project. The project is expected to generate perpetual revenues at the end of each year. Determine the project's break-even level for annual expenses. The initial cost is $26,000. The first year revenues is $1,200. Annual expenses is what we have to evaluate. The revenues growth rate is 5%, and the cost of capital is 8.5%. So we basically have to set the project net present. NPV here is 0 because we try to make the break-even level. Here the initial cost is what we have to pay, so it's negative. We got negative 2600, negative 26,000. The first year revenues is what we receive, so it should be positive. And let's say X is the annual expenses. So we got the numerator is 200 times 1 minus X. And the denominator is the exist of the cost of capital over the revenues growth rate. And set this equal to 0 and solve for X. We got X here is 24.17%, which means the annual expense rate is 24.17%. Problem 2. You are given the following annual cash flows in real dollars. C0 is negative 200, C1 is 75, C2 is 90, C3 100. Assuming a normal interest rate of 10% and an inflation rate of 5%, what is the project's net present value? So here we have to find the present value of all of these cash flows. The first one, negative 200 at time 0, then 75 at time 1. So we take 75 times 1.05 divided by 1.1 because the inflation rate is 5% and the interest rate nominally is 10%. Then time 2, we got 90 times 1.05 over 1.1 square because we calculated at time 2. Then time 3, we got 100 times 1.05 over 1.1 cube. And the answer here is 40.57. So the net present value of this project is 40.57. Problem 3. Consider a project that will generate revenues at the end of the first and the second years. Initial costs and expenses are $2,500. In addition, the project's cost of capital is 6.6%. You are given the following information: scenario 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first year revenue of the first scenario is $1,100, and the second year revenues is $2,900, and so on. Determine the project's net present value of the worst scenario. The worst scenario is the one with the lowest NPV, and in this case it should be 1 because 1 produces the smallest cash flow. If you don't know which one is the worst, basically you can calculate the NPV for all of these 4 scenarios and pick the lowest one. And here, after I do the calculation, I realize that the first one is the worst scenario, so I'm going to use the first one. And the NPV of it is negative 2,500 plus 1,100 over 1.066 plus 2,900 over 1.066 squared, and the answer is $1,083.91. Problem 4. You are given the following information about a project. The initial cost is not given. The first year revenue is $200. The annual expenses is 15%. The revenue growth rate is 5%. The cost of capital is 8.5%. This project is expected to generate perpetual revenue at the end of each year. In addition, in each year, expenses are 15% of revenue payable at the end of the year. Determine the project break-even level for initial costs. So again, in order to determine the project break-even level for initial costs, we have to write out the NPV and then set the NPV equal to 0 and solve for the initial cost. Here I'm going to call the initial cost at X as C. So I have minus C plus 200 times 1 minus 0.15 over 0.085 minus 0.05 is equal to 0. Here 0.15 is the annual expenses. 0.085 is 8.5%, which is the cost of capital. 0.05 is 5%, which is the revenues growth rate. So from here we have an equation of C, and go ahead and solve for C. We got C is 29,142. So the break-even level of the initial cost should be 29,142, which means if we have the initial cost of 29,142 at the beginning, then the NPV of this project should be 0, meaning the project costs nothing. Problem 5. You are given the following information about a project. This project is expected to generate perpetual revenues at the end of each year. In addition, in each year, expenses are 15% of revenues payable at the end of the year. Determine the project break-even level for cost of capital. Here, the cost of capital is not given, so I'm going to call X for the cost of capital. And I have the initial cost is 26,000, so it should be negative. I got negative 26,000 plus 200 is the first year revenues times with 1 subtract the annual expenses in order to find we take 200 times 1 minus 0.015, and then the denominator will take the cost of capital, which is X, subtract the revenue growth rate 0.05, and set this equation equal to 0 and solve for X. We got X is 8.92%. So the cost of capital, that the break-even level of cost of capital here is 8.92%. Alright, so that's it for today. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my video. If you like this video, please like, share, or subscribe.